50 years ago last year, women got to vote, I hear. But we just sat on dusty shelves because we never helped ourselves.
I've been married for 13 years, and let me tell you, it's a thrill to be out of the house.
Married men can still be free, but a woman, what is she? A servant with no pay for life, just so she can stay a wife.
I never get out of the house. I stay home all the time. I never do anything fun because I'm a housewife.
A status symbol with a ring. Tell me what that's gonna bring. A legal right to bear his kids while liberation he forbids.
I could go, Roseanne. Well, maybe if you start now, you could have a clean house by Christmas. Who am I, June Cleaver?
So ladies, drop the kitchen mop, and we'll be heard somehow. Men have made a mess of things they should be stopped by now. By now. By now.
A woman is me.
Roseanne Barr was born on November 3rd, 1952, in Salt Lake City, Utah, to Jewish parents, Jerry and Helen Barr. Her father, Jerry, was a salesman, and her mother, Helen, a homemaker. The family lived in an apartment complex owned by Roseanne's maternal grandmother, Bubby Mary. The complex housed Jewish refugees from World War II and was considered a safe haven for the Jewish people, who were seen as outsiders in Salt Lake City's Mormon community. Roseanne, the oldest of four, was a lively, animated child with a big imagination. But growing up in an environment where horror stories from the Holocaust were frequently told, Roseanne developed a fearful spirit that often left her paranoid. In her 1989 memoir, My Life as a Woman, Roseanne recalls, "We lived on Park Street in Salt Lake, in a big tenement slum, which my grandparents owned. After World War II, they sponsored several Jewish survivors from Naziville, and almost every one of the 12 apartments were filled at one time by these people. Every Friday night for Shabbat, the entire clan would congregate in my grandmother's apartment for dinner, dancing and the telling of the stories, which were about how, 10 years previous, 1/3 of all the people who looked like us disappeared from the earth. When they told these stories, I tried to go into the bedroom and put pillows over my ears, or watch TV with the sound up loud, or sing to myself. Still, I always heard, and I was afraid. I didn't understand geography. I thought that these horrible things had happened just down the street, on the next block, very close to me. Now I feel it was even closer than that. It was one breath away. Sometimes, still, I feel like I could weep. Just lay my head in my hands. I am always at the edge of collapse. In this world, when I think about how fragile everything is, and how we spend our lives trying to create safety, and yet, there is no such thing.
When I was 3 years old, I grew up in an apartment house that was owned by my grandmother and my grandfather, and they sponsored 50 survivors from Auschwitz to come to Salt Lake City, Utah, and live in their apartment building. And that is where I grew up. I grew up in an apartment building with people who had numbers tattooed on their arms. And every Friday night, we would go to my grandmother's home for Shabbat dinner. And when people are in trauma, they're in trauma. And they were in such trauma, these adults, that they would tell stories on Shabbat. They would tell horrifying stories that I didn't want to hear. And they would always point to me and say, little girls like her, just like her. This is what they did because they were in trauma. And I used to run into my grandmother's bathroom, and I was too short to lock the door, but I would hide in the laundry. I thought they were talking about now, the world now, or then. When I became 3 years old, I was tall enough to turn the black knob on my grandmother's door and lock them out. And that was a very happy day for me. And as I sat there in my grandmother's bathroom, I got up on her toilet. Next to it was a sink, and the sink had a mirror above it, and behind it was another mirror on the wall that you could go like this and touch. They weren't far. And when I got up in that mirror and I opened the medicine cabinet, I saw myself multiplied by infinity in the two mirrors. And I couldn't believe it. And about that time, I saw something. And you don't want to tell anybody this kind of thing, because right away they say you're crazy, especially they say it in Russia. And they put you in a mental institution, and they still do in the United States, and probably here and everywhere else too. If you have a vision from heaven or from something higher than this earth, they do think you're crazy. So, I always like to cloak that in a little bit of analogy. But I did. And I heard someone talking to me. And that voice told me, you'll be all right. You'll live. And that voice said to me, at one time in your life, you will have the answer to every question that you have right now in your mind. And when I asked that voice not to leave, it said, I'll always be with you. And I said, how will I find you? And it said, I'm in books.
After residing at the apartment complex for some years, the Barrs eventually moved into a home of their own, not too far away. But unlike their previous community, the Barrs would be the only Jewish family in town. Though Roseanne was relieved to be away from the depressing atmosphere at her previous residence, being the only Jewish girl in their neighborhood was frightening. In an attempt to blend in with their new neighbors, Roseanne's mother, Helen, began encouraging her family to practice Mormonism. In her eyes, it was bad enough the family was poor, but to be poor and Jewish was seen as the ultimate sin. Roseanne would initially push back against the idea, but after being healed by a Mormon priest following a sudden accident, the outspoken young girl began to embrace it. In her book, Roseanne writes, "There were no other Jews in our neighborhood. I was always the only Jew at school, and so very paranoid. I always felt the onslaught of the Nazis was very close. There was only one safe place on earth to be Jewish then, one safe place against the imagined and real attack of terrorism, and that was at my grandma's house. When I was 3 or 4, I fell on the leg of the kitchen dinette, and my face froze in a manner that resembled an older person who had had a stroke. When it did not return to normal the next day, Mother called the rabbi, who said a prayer for me, and nothing happened. The next day, in escalating panic, Mother called the Mormon priest. The day after the Mormons prayed, I was miraculously healed. Even though we were not Mormon, but Jewish, the mystique of the new Zion had also enveloped us, and Mother feared the wrath of the God of the Gentiles. When my face became healed, Mother accepted it as a sign from God that the Mormon faith was the one true religion and that she and I should join it. But she was afraid of the wrath of her own mother And so there was a compromise. Friday, Saturday, and Sunday morning, I was a Jew. Sunday afternoon, Tuesday afternoon, and Wednesday afternoon, we were Mormons. So after I learned about my people being murdered in every country but America, I could then learn about my new forebears being persecuted in Illinois, New York, and Utah. This made for a complete and well-rounded feeling of paranoia.
So, Salt Lake City.
Yeah.
What was that like?
It was pretty much, it was different. It was kind of, in many ways, a baptism by fire to be there, to be a smart girl, a smart fat girl, and a smart fat Jewish girl. Those were like a lot of factors. And to be a smart fat Jewish girl of working class, origins in Salt Lake City, Utah, the reddest state of all the red states. So, you can imagine. There's a lot of politics
Not
there.
red in the 1950s.
No, but I mean red
sort
now.
Sort of the opposite.
Right. Sort of the opposite. Exactly what they call red states now. Deeply conservative. And, so it was kind of like being a fish out of water, to say the least. But, it did give me it gave me a lot of things to think about and to kind of attempt to traverse my way through. And
was being Jewish in a large Mormon community an issue for you growing up?
Yeah, it was an issue of fitting in because all of our neighbors were like that. And,
Did most think you were Mormon?
Well, yeah, a lot of them did think we were Mormon because my mother sent us to the Mormon church so that we could fit in with our neighbors, We were, assimilating into the dominant culture. And so we went to, especially me, and of all the four of my mom's kids, I went to the Mormon church, and I was kind of a big star in the Mormon church for a while, too. I used to go around and give speeches and little sermons and stuff like that with my mom for the Mormon church about a healing that happened to me when I was 3.
Explain.
When I was 3 years old, I fell on my face and got Bell's palsy. And because it's Salt Lake City, my mother first called a rabbi to pray for me, and the Bell's palsy didn't go away. And then she called the Mormon elders to come and pray for me, and they did, and the Bell's palsy went away.
After how long?
After 48 hours. And I always wonder why a health professional was not consulted, but that's Salt Lake. And later at age 16, when reading medical journals became my hobby or obsession, I found that Bell's palsy was a 48-hour condition largely. So it was like a freakazoid. It was just all freakazoid. It was very religious. I was in an Orthodox Jewish family the other half of the time, and a really staid Mormon community. So I couldn't help but become me, I think.
For the next 10 years, Roseanne would spend half of her time practicing Mormonism and the other half practicing Judaism. Though this double life left Roseanne feeling confused and afflicted, she was a model Mormon who believed that Mormonism was the true religion of God. But Roseanne's unwavering commitment to the faith would drastically change when on September 17, 1968, at the tender age of 16, she was struck by a car. In her book, Roseanne recalls this near-death experience, writing, "When I was 16, I was walking to school. I had knowledge stored in my head. I knew that America was the greatest country on earth. I feared the way communists think and that they might be out to get me. I also feared people who were not Mormon because, well, they couldn't be saved and were probably all child abusers, murderers, etc. I wanted to be a hairdresser, a teacher, a housewife. I wanted to be a mother. But I thought I would never find the right guy who really loved me because I was fat. I believed that when I died, I would go to heaven and see God. And I believed that black men had bigger weenies. I was normal, not nuts at all, not paranoid, just naive, not delusional, just young. So I'm crossing the street at about 8:40 in the morning, and I remember standing on the corner and looking down the hill and up the street, looking for cars. And then I stepped off the curb and kind of jaywalked a little bit, but not too much out of the walkway. This car hit me. I didn't even see it coming. I was thrown up into the air and came down on the hood, where the ornament went into my head. In addition to being hit by the car, Roseanne would also be dragged 20 feet down the road before the car came to a complete stop. When it finally did, the tires were on Roseanne's legs, crushing them. Roseanne would be taken to the hospital and make a full recovery. But with her physical state on the mend, Roseanne's mental health severely declined. The once well-behaved girl, who always followed the rules, was now caught stealing cars, drinking alcohol, and smoking marijuana. The girl who had once proclaimed Mormonism to be the true religion of God was now denouncing it. The accident would be the beginning of a radical change in Roseanne's personality, a change so drastic that it would land her in the state's mental hospital for almost 9 months. In her book, Roseanne writes, "How do you write about a time in your life when you were crazy, nuts, out of it, lost? I wasn't the chemical kind of nuts, or the mentally ill kind of nuts, or the dangerous kind of nuts, not schizo or nothing like that. I was part of the normal world where everything bad that has ever happened to you is blamed on you. When you are told over and over again, sometimes by people who are paid to help you, that maybe it happened to you, well, because you wanted it to, somehow. Because you asked for it, or that's what you get when you rock the boat, go out looking for trouble, mouth off, think you know everything, disrespect law, your elders, the rules. The kind of world where you're always told that you might actually desire being hurt, humiliated, beaten, abused, left, because you don't think you're good enough, or that you think you don't deserve better. The kind of world where you are told all your life not to be independent, but to belong, not to fight, but conform." After the accident, I had a lot of trouble focusing and remembering things. I had always been an A student, and now suddenly, the concept of math began to fade, and I couldn't understand it anymore. I began to write poetry, weird poetry that I couldn't understand. It would all just come pouring out, as if I were in a trance. Almost every night after the accident, I would dream that I could not wake up. I was horrified that people would think I was dead and bury me alive. I was afraid to sleep, and sometimes I would make it for days without it. Once, I hadn't slept for several days and was sitting in my mother's living room where my eyes rolled back and I went into convulsions. I think this is when Mama started to think about having me hospitalized. At this time, I started to have an obsession with fives. Everything had to count out to 5, or something terrible would happen. When I was in the nut house, we used to go on panels to all the schools with social workers around every college in Utah, and we talked to them. The doctor would come with us, and he'd go, "Well, we're here to talk about mental illness and youth, and these are our panel members." And then I'd go, "My name is Roseanne, and I'm in here because I'm psychotic." And the doctor goes, "No one on our panel is psychotic, Roseanne." And I go, "Well, then why am I in here?" I wasn't ever nuts until after I got hit by that car. Mom says all the time, I was just fine until I got hit by that car. Just fine.
When you were 16, was it 16 when you were hit by the car?
Yeah. I'm
so funny to me.
It's not so funny.
I don't know, because it's so bizarre.
That was a turning point.
Yeah, I'm going to school and I get hit by a car, and I like died, you know. I died, or whatever you call it. I was unconscious, so maybe I went really deep in myself. It was either death or that, one of those things. But I was in a coma. When I woke up a while later, I wasn't the same person that I was before the car accident, because I had gone to a place where I guess a lot of people don't go, to the very edge. And when I came back, it was all going to be my way. And it always was my way after that.
So what'd you do?
Well, I did go through that rebellion period after I got hit by the car. Then I went on to the next thing, which was after I had this great personality change. You know, my parents kind of panicked, and I went to all these social workers, and, you know, the cut rate kind down at the mental health center is $3.50 an hour, you know, and they kind of diagnosed me, and then they kind of send me away.
Now, come on. This is something that I do know about from reading about you, and it's, I don't know, very odd to say the least, but here you were, this kid who was, your parents couldn't figure out, and they sent you to a mental hospital. For how long?
I was there for about 8.5 months.
It is not possible for a 17-year-old to spend 8 months in a hospital and not have it even today hurt, frightened, something. I mean, you are not the average person today, Roseanne, okay, even though you represent, you know, that. So something had to come from that time.
Oh, everything came from that time.
Okay.
Yeah, everything came from there. But I'm trying to think of how to put it and how to talk about it, because some parts of it are unspeakable. But it was a very horrifying place. Everything about it was horrifying, and luckily or unluckily, I was very heavily drugged, so I saw everything through a pretty intense fog. But it was Dante's Inferno, you know, but it was the place where you come out of and you emerge and you become something else, or else you die. And I came out.
Did you ever think that maybe there was something seriously wrong with you?
I thought the thing that was seriously wrong with me was that I was in Utah, and I still do it 15 years later, yeah.
Did you forgive your parents?
I tried to. Yeah, I tried to forgive my parents. And I think they've tried to forgive themselves, too. So it wasn't easy on them either. And it wasn't easy on anyone who was ever there. And, yeah, you know, I just emerged. I emerged from there a different person.
Roseanne's time in the mental hospital was difficult for many reasons. According to Roseanne, though she acknowledged that her behavior was out of control, she didn't quite understand how her parents could essentially give up on her by having her hospitalized. But contrary to Roseanne's version of events, her younger sister Geraldine has a different account. According to Geraldine, her parents did not force Roseanne into the facility. Roseanne admitted herself. In her 1994 book, My Sister Roseanne, Geraldine writes, "Being struck by that car changed everything." Roseanne was 16 years old, a time of rebellion and extremes of emotions under the best of circumstances. Rosie had later told me that 2 things shocked her about the accident. The first was the fact that she nearly died. The second shock was the fact that she did not remember getting hit by the car. She never even heard the vehicle. There was never a warning horn or a screeching of brakes. She came out of the coma trying to figure out how she had gone from crossing the street to being in a hospital's intensive care unit. She was angry at the loss of control. Following the accident, Rosie wanted to live life on the edge. She was wild and out of control. Rosie did agree to go to outpatient counseling, much to my parents' relief. But the problem came when Roseanne decided she wanted to check herself into the state hospital in Provo. Our father was especially upset. He remembers begging her to not commit herself to the state hospital, before trying the other options. She would have none of it. Rosie checked herself into the hospital around the middle of November 1969. She was 17 and headstrong, and under the regulations of Provo, that was old enough for voluntary commitment. Rosie was in full charge of her stay, being free to check out of the hospital anytime she requested. No drugs would be administered without her approval. No therapy would take place without her consent. She was in control of her stay, and she was never considered insane. Mom and Dad were embarrassed at having their daughter in the state mental facility, and certainly did not encourage her to stay. To my parents, any inpatient treatment that appeared non-essential seemed to be a condemnation of how they raised us kids. They felt the social stigma attached to such voluntary commitment. I think Rosie thought it was more dramatic to imply in her memoirs that she was somehow there against her will. In fact, Rosie has told variations of the same story often enough that she probably believes it. She created a life she had never led, then spoke with such conviction that seemingly no one knew or cared that nothing she was presenting was the truth. That time, presumably, no one was physically or emotionally hurt by what she did. Later, her words and actions came close to destroying our family. It should be noted that in recent years, Roseanne has admitted to the fact that she voluntarily checked herself into the mental hospital, despite alleging for decades that her parents had her hospitalized.
That was a big depression I went into because I couldn't remember things, And also I became way more impulsive. Then I was like, I don't know what I did. Then I started going really out there into the ethers. I went way out there.
Like how so?
Way out.
So what was it that they brought you in there for? How were you behaving that they decided that you needed to be admitted?
I was out there.
You say that, like, what does that mean?
I don't think there's any words the English
you just
can understand.
You didn't have a control of reality. You didn't have control of your behavior. Your thinking was screwed up. I was,
not thinking like the normal thing that they say you should be thinking about.
But people around you had realized that it was so bad that they had to admit you to a hospital. It wasn't just that, oh, Roseanne, she's eccentric. It was, she needs actual medical help.
Yeah, I asked to be admitted.
You knew something was really wrong.
Yeah. I finally admitted it was.
Did you know at the time, were you completely aware that it was connected to your car accident?
No.
You just knew something was wrong?
Yeah.
And back then, they didn't really kind of understand that the way they understand it now.
No, they didn't understand too much about bipolar disorder, or they knew nothing about multiple personality disorder.
Trauma-related.
Trauma-related,
well.
yeah. PTSD, now they call everything PTS.
Yeah.
They don't even say D anymore. They say PTS. Post-traumatic stress.
So when they admitted you, what was the treatment? Like, what did they do to you when you were inside the mental hospital?
Well, they right away put me on an antipsychotic.
What was it? Do you remember?
Marital.
What did that do?
I don't know. But anyway, I went on antipsychotic medicine, and that was good that I was on there for the shit I saw.
Now, when you say
my friends hanging and stuff like that.
You saw your friends hanging
Yeah.
in the mental institution?
Yeah. So I saw worse than that.
What'd you see?
I saw, victims of abuse. It's terrible.
By the guards?
No, of kids coming,
Oh, victims of
from their
abuse
families.
that came in that were mentally scarred by that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, when they put you on antipsychotics, was it because you were exhibiting psychotic behavior?
Yeah.
What kind of psychotic behavior?
Well, they thought it was psychotic. I was just scared that I think I was throwing them off because I wanted to think I was psychotic. I didn't want them to think I was schizophrenic. I knew enough not to let them near me. Because once you got the diagnosis of schizophrenic, they would
Electric
do
shock.
shocks, and
Yeah.
they'd experiment on you, basically. You were in a guinea pig, and I didn't want that.
Jesus.
So maybe I, and then, so yeah, I was doing weird things, like walking down the middle of streets after I got hit by the car. I walked down the middle of streets. I don't know. I thought, oh, you got to get over your fear of crossing the streets. That's what was in my head. And then I'd walk down a highway,
Whoa.
I was in a whole other realm. It was like a real surrealistic and metaphysical realm.
Following Roseanne's exit from the mental hospital, her life continued to spiral. In an act of rebellion, Roseanne would have her first sexual experience that resulted in a pregnancy. According to Roseanne, when she broke the news to her parents, they were less than thrilled. They allegedly told Roseanne that she and her, quote, illegitimate baby were not welcome in their home. Forced to raise the baby on her own, Roseanne moved out of her parents' house and into an apartment. But after 3 days of living alone, Roseanne realized just how difficult raising a child would be. After much thought, Roseanne came to the conclusion that she could not keep the baby. In her 1994 memoir, My Lives, Roseanne writes, "After I was released from the nut house, I went home for 3 months and promptly got pregnant. I told my parents about the baby. That revelation led to me running away from home and moving into a dumpy apartment for $50 a month. I had to go on welfare. When I went to the welfare office to get my welfare money, I saw kids there with the welfare eyes and smelled my own death. That's when I knew I couldn't keep my baby. No money to care for either of us properly. No support from my parents, who had no intention of letting me keep an illegitimate kid. My dad spit on me. I moved to a home for unwed mothers in Denver, and my first child was adopted by a Jewish family. The day after she was born, I called my parents. Well, I had the baby, I said. My mother wanted to know what it was, a boy or a girl. I don't really feel like telling you that, I said. Oh, please, I'm still the grandmother, she responded. It's a girl, I answered. Is she cute? She asked. Yeah. As a matter of fact, she was beautiful. When I went back home after the birth, my mother told me she wanted to go out and have a girl talk. Roseanne, do you ever think about her? She asked. You listen to me, I stammered. I never want you to mention my baby or anything about her to me ever again. This fake concern you've got is sadistic. And when I find her, you'll never see her. She knew I wanted to keep my baby, but she never once offered her assistance, help, or concern. Her claims and cries, "What will the neighbors say?" meant more to her than her own grandchild or daughter. And the neighbors were largely losers and insane or drunks.
So all of this, like it's starting to come into focus now, like how you wound up on the stage and how you were an instant hit, and like given your past and the fearlessness and the need to be funny and just sort of your irreverence. So, but before we get to that, can we just spend a minute? Because you were 18 and you found yourself pregnant and you decided to give the baby
Well, I
up
didn't
for
find
adoption.
myself pregnant.
You went and got pregnant.
Yeah. Well, I had sex because I don't know. I just really wanted to have sex because I thought I should because everyone else was doing it, And I just wanted to know what it was like and all that, like everybody else. And well, I read these books. Never read books. Anyway, no, I'm kidding. But I got it backwards because I'm dyslexic, I guess. So I thought I was doing it on the safe days of my cycle. Turns out I was doing it on the most fertile days. So I had sex.
Boy.
The first time I ever had sex, I got pregnant. I did that real good. So yeah. So the sex I had, I don't even remember it. And well, actually I do, but I'm trying not to. But anyway, I ended up having a baby and I gave her up for adoption. I had her and I had to go to the Salvation Army home for unwed mothers where I had her. And then I had to give her up for adoption, which was very hard. And when she was born, she had one ear that was kind of misshapen. It was folded over like my mom's ear. And I thought, oh, God made her ear like that, so I'll be able to find her when she's 18. And I always said, and I told her when I got to keep her for 2 days, and I told her, I'll see you again when you're 18, and I'll recognize you from your ear. And so that's why I kept my name Roseanne Barr, because in my mind, I was like, I'm going to be famous.
A lot of young girls, 18 years old, would have made a different decision. Would have chosen an abortion instead of to carry the baby to term and give it up, which you know is going to be emotionally tough for you. How did you think about that at the time?
I knew it was going to be tough because I thought, I'm never going to even know if she's alive or if she did get good parents. But I would always keep tabs on that Jewish and Family Children's Services there in Denver. I always like to spy on people.
Consider not going through with the pregnancy?
No. I lived in Utah, and that wasn't a possibility. But even if it had been, that's not for me. I'm not, that's not for me. I think we're way past the point where abortion should be anything that anybody thinks of, because we have the technology to prevent pregnancies, and it's just barbaric that we haven't come farther than that. And it really makes me mad when they say women have the right to choose, and then the choice they're talking about is that something so barbaric. And yesterday, when I say, why don't they just clip little boys when they're born, give them a vasectomy at birth that can be reversed when they grow up and get a damn job. You know what I mean? They could do something easy like that. But instead they choose this barbarity. And, there's a lot of reasons why. They're all horrible. But we should be beyond that kind of a remedy for, we shouldn't even have unwanted pregnancies. Hello, that's ridiculous. We can fake like we send a man to the moon and we can't prevent pregnancy.
Following the adoption, Roseanne carried a lot of pain and resentment towards her parents. In her eyes, due to their lack of support, she was forced to give her baby up. But contrary to Roseanne's version of events, her sister has a different account. According to Geraldine, Roseanne's claims that their mother was unsupportive and wanted her to put the baby up for adoption is simply not true. Geraldine explains, Mom never could have tolerated the idea of Roseanne terminating the pregnancy, but that was never a consideration for my sister. Instead, the question was whether Rosie would raise the baby herself or give the child up for adoption. The decision was difficult for Rosie. She was too young to raise a child, too immature, too busy trying to understand herself to care for a newborn. She was essentially a child having a child, and this she seemed to instinctively understand. She came to the conclusion that she would give the baby up for adoption. Rosie never asked Mom her feelings. Mom was determined to let Rosie handle the difficult time in whatever way her daughter felt was best. However, what Mom did not say to anyone is that she wanted to adopt her daughter's baby. Rosie never considered Mom's adopting her baby after it was born. She did not ask, and Mom did not volunteer her desire. Whatever might have been, the fact that Mom was not considered hurts her to this day. She still says with anguish, "No one ever asked me what I felt. No one ever asked me if I wanted to adopt my grandchild." The Barr family had many ups and downs over the years, and the adoption of Roseanne's baby would only add more pain to an already fractured family. According to Roseanne, in addition to the toxic family dynamics, there was also allegedly physical, emotional, and even sexual abuse in the home. In an effort to get away from it all, Roseanne, then 19, escaped to Georgetown, Colorado, in hopes of starting a new life. Upon her arrival, Roseanne would meet and fall in love with Bill Pentland, a 20-year-old night clerk who worked at a nearby motel. And despite having a tumultuous relationship, the couple wed on February 4th, 1974.
After this whole experience?
Yeah.
Out?
Yeah. I went to live on a commune in the mountains of Colorado.
And met
my husband and some very good friends that are still my very good friends. And
tell me about life then. Tell me about Bill. What'd you like?
When I met him,
like?
you mean?
Yeah. Was it love at first sight?
For me, it was.
Really?
Yeah, when I walked in and I saw Bill, I went, I'm going to marry this guy.
How'd you know?
I just knew. I've always just known. It's real weird. So, okay, we bought a trailer. We were just living together then. Well, we bought a trailer because, we had to invest. We had to invest our money, So we bought a 6-foot wide trailer and everything. And then we went to see this horrible movie, The Exorcist.
Mm-hmm.
One day, it was so weird. I'm sitting there in my trailer and I'm thinking I'm getting possessed by Satan, because like a lot of people thought they were getting possessed after seeing The Exorcist. I open the door and who's there? Mormon missionaries. I mean, it's like, whoa. So I go, come on in, guys. Could you exercise me? Look, I think I'm getting possessed by Satan here. And, I just go to I go to real weird places sometimes. So they come in and, they said they'd exercise. And then they asked me, was I married? And I go, I'm living with a guy. Well, that's why Satan's trying to get into you because you're living in sin here. So I called Bill. We have got to get married. I'm getting possessed by, and he thought he was being possessed too. I mean, Bill's like goofy too. So we think we're getting possessed by Satan. So that's why we got married. And then,
doesn't everybody?
Then we really got possessed by Satan. Then we really went to hell.
Upon their nuptials, Roseanne quickly settled into married life. 3 months after exchanging vows, Roseanne found out she was expecting. The couple welcomed daughters Jessica in 1975 and Jennifer in 1976. According to Roseanne, she was living the life she had always dreamed of. But 1 month before giving birth to their son Jake in 1978, Roseanne's world would come crashing down when, out of nowhere, Bill admitted to having a one-night stand. In her book, My Lives, Roseanne writes, Bill had come home drunk, sat on the toilet with his pants around his ankles, and told me, "Where have you been for the last 8 hours?" I asked him. "I was 9 months pregnant." "Well," he said, "I've been with the woman." "I have a confession to make," he said to me. "This happened to me because I'm ashamed of you because you're fat." There, I finally said it. I took the kids and went to Motel 6. I sat there all night, came up with a dozen schemes, and when none of them flew, went home in the morning to Bill. I had no place to go, no skills, having dropped out of high school in the 9th grade after my accident. I loved Bill, though. No. I needed him because he was a big drunk, and I needed to take care of somebody. So it was a total codependent relationship, although I didn't know it at the time. I wanted to be a good wife, raise a family, have a hamburger helper and Jell-O dinner waiting for my magnificent husband. I wanted to with all my heart, until Bill cheated on me while I was pregnant with my 3rd kid in 4 years. After that, I could never trust or feel close to him again. I told him I wasn't gonna leave him, but as soon as I had the baby, I'd lose a ton of weight and then get even. After I had my son, I lost 120 pounds. I then demanded to be allowed to have a part-time job, selling women's clothing at a mall in Denver, as well as a driver's license and my own car. Previously, Bill didn't want me to work, and he wouldn't let me have a car either. He wanted me in the house, barefoot and pregnant.
Roseanne, at this point, he's a mail clerk.
Yeah.
You're in the house.
One time I left the house to buy a ham, and I was so panicked that I never left the house.
You just stayed home all day and took care of the kids?
I never left my house for 7 years.
Roseanne, you are weird.
I know. That's what I'm trying to tell you.
See, I sort of thought that you were normal, but
I am normal.
You are, but you're not.
But the thing is
but
that
you really are weird.
But
yeah.
the thing is that I'm very normal because more people are like me than
You're probably
than AIDS.
right. Yeah.
I lost a lot of weight. I lost 120 pounds.
Why?
I lost 120 pounds
And you were
because I
skinny-
just got real tired of being fat.
Okay.
You know, so I lost all this weight, and then all I cared about, I had this deep fear of like losing weight because I had this real fear, like when you're thin, you're really going to become stupid and everything like this, all the things that fat people are afraid of. And all of it happened.
You became stupid?
I became really stupid, and all I cared about was belts. I don't know, belts. And accessories. I really did. It was real weird.
You talked about when you lost 100 pounds.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then I'll talk about how I gained it back.
Why did you gain it back?
I like being fat.
Do you really?
Yeah.
Do you really?
Yeah.
Why do you like being fat?
Well, there's just been times in my life where I've liked being fat, and there are other times in my life where I've liked being thin. And I don't think that your weight makes you happy or unhappy. I think it's all the other stuff. But sometimes I think it's the greatest thing any woman can do is to be fat, and the sexiest thing any woman can do is to be as fat as me or fatter. And sometimes I want to be thin, and it just happens.
Bill's infidelity would crush Roseanne's world as she knew it. But shortly after learning of his indiscretions, Roseanne's family would experience another crisis. The year was 1980, when Roseanne's younger sister Stephanie, then 17, called with some shocking allegations. In her book, My Lives, Roseanne recalls this conversation. I got a call from my sister Stephanie, who was living with my parents in Utah. She was whispering, big pauses, maybe a minute between every word. What? I prodded her. Well, I'm in my room, and I haven't left my room for 2 weeks, she said. Oh, come on, what's the matter? I asked. Well, something happened, she responded. She tells me Daddy did something. Well, what did he do? Did he beat the crap out of you or what? No, he put his hands down my pants. I told Stephanie to get the hell out of there and to buy a plane ticket to Denver now, and she did. She was there the next day. I called my mother and told her what Steph had said. Well, that's totally ridiculous, she denied. If he did do anything, it's because he's on heart medication, and he didn't mean anything by it. She's just trying to cause trouble. You don't believe her, do you? Well, yeah, she's pretty shook up. Something happened, I responded. Well, maybe he grabbed her or something when he was on the drug and she took it wrong. You know how she gets overly dramatic about everything? Mom said. You gotta talk to her about it at least, I told Mother. She's all ripped up. You have to do something. Well, I'm not going to tell your dad because it will kill him, she responded. He just had a bypass, and this will kill him. I didn't call my mother for a while after that, 'cause I was just lost. Steph talked to her a few weeks later. Well, Mom believes me, she told me. I called Mom and asked her about it. I told her I believe that something is bothering her. I didn't tell her I believed what she said, Mom corrected. Following the allegations, Roseanne would be granted temporary custody of Stephanie. It should be noted that Stephanie has since denied these claims and has gone on the record to state that allegations of abuse against her father are false. Geraldine has also gone on the record and said that this entire situation was made up by Roseanne and that their father never harmed Stephanie, nor did Stephanie ever accuse him of harming her. In her book, Geraldine offers a different narrative. Stephanie had the greatest difficulty with the least support within the family. When she was 17, our parents were in turmoil. In a relatively short period of time, Mom and Dad experienced the nightmare of almost losing their oldest daughter in a car accident. Then Rosie checked herself into the mental hospital. Finally, Rosie had an out-of-wedlock baby she gave to loving strangers when my mother intensely wanted to adopt her newborn granddaughter. And after that, she became involved with a man they knew nothing about and settled into an unfamiliar city. Mom and Dad also had to contend with the fact that their only son came out of the closet. He admitted to the mother of his child, then to our parents, that he was gay. In most families, and especially in a Jewish home, where sons are often more respected than daughters, having a daughter in love with another woman is less traumatic than having a son in love with another man. Ben's coming out became the focus for my parents' frequent arguments. Mom and Dad seemed to be angry, hurt, and in denial, not only about Ben's life, but also about what made him gay. They were certain it was a choice, and my mother was convinced at first that the choice was determined by Dad's failings. "You should have played more baseball with him," I remember Mom wailing. Against this background of pain and confusion, Stephanie decided she didn't want to continue living in the midst of such tension. With Stephanie now living in Denver with Roseanne, Geraldine, who was close with Roseanne at the time, decided to move to Denver too and reunite with her sisters. Upon their reunion, they began to plot and plan. Every night, the sisters gathered around Roseanne's kitchen table, discussing women's issues, patriarchy, and politics. These conversations led Roseanne and Geraldine into joining a women's movement in late 1980. This movement introduced the sisters to a wide range of women from all backgrounds. Located at the Women to Women bookstore in Denver, this organization would be the place where Roseanne realized for the first time that she wanted to be more than just a housewife with a part-time job. Unable to sit back and watch then-President Ronald Reagan, quote, dismantle the middle class, Roseanne wanted to make a change. In her book, My Life as a Woman, she writes, "I would be seated at a desk all day, running a nonprofit referral line. It was the beginning of the 1980s, and the voices from the left were being silenced by the voices from the right. The voice of women began to turn, as they always have, towards a populist point of view. I would sit all day at my desk, taking calls, explaining to women that the information and help they were looking for was no longer available. It had all died due to budget cuts or misappropriations of funding. In other words, Reaganomics. Because we were located in the heart of downtown, we saw it all. First came the wave of mentally handicapped who had been released from hospitals due to lack of funding. Then came the wave of prostitutes, beaten, addicted to drugs. Next came the wave of homeless women and children."
So how did you end up going into comedy?
I was, writing for a woman's magazine called Big Mama Rag. And, I liked writing humor. Well, I should say I wanted to write seriously, but it kept turning funny. And so I just kept, finally I just went to hell with it. When I was 28, I went to hell with it. I'm just going to be funny. Right after, Reagan got elected and I saw it all going to hell from, the window of the bookstore I was writing for Big Mama Rag at. And I just saw it all go to hell on a street level, right there in Denver, Colorado. I saw my first mentally ill people released on the streets. I saw all in 1980, I saw all of it when Reagan was elected. So I'm like, I was trying to hold on by my fingernails. And it was like my dad said, it was, they were going to undo everything that people had worked so long and hard for.
During this time, Roseanne considered herself a radical feminist who made it her mission to help solve women's issues. While working at the Feminist bookstore, Roseanne would also begin working at a night bar called Bennigan's as a cocktail waitress. It was there where Roseanne would be subjected to crude remarks from male patrons. According to Roseanne, they often made comments about her body, particularly her breast. For a while, Roseanne would ignore their comments until one day when she had had enough. In her book, she writes, One day, something just snapped, and I talked back to them. This man said, "Bring me one of these, honey." I turned around and I said, "Don't call me honey, you effing pig." He just started laughing. Well, good thing he started laughing is all I can say. There was another guy who told me, "Do you know anybody that is married and does not want to get divorced and wants to fool around with somebody else who is married, who has a lot of money, who likes to spend it on a special woman and have sex a lot and go to special places and be taken care of?" And I go, "Well, only your wife." Then it started to mutate into a place where you just look at men and you are being so honest with them and they can appreciate it. A lot of men can handle that, and that is just always the miracle that amazes me. These men at the bar were my friends. They would always laugh, and then they would come back. One day, one of them told me that I should go on stage. He said that I should go down to the comedy shop and tell all the men that they were effing idiots, and I was taking over. It would take Roseanne approximately 6 months to write her first 5-minute set, but with the help of her husband Bill and her sister Geraldine, Roseanne eventually developed her act.
Like I get up this morning, I put my maxi pad on and he's upside up. Oh yeah, sure, like you've never done it. Attitude, babe. Makes you cranky, don't it? So you're a woman, right? You never tell in the 80s.
Roseanne's first performance at the comedy shop's open mic night was exhilarating, realizing that she could use comedy as a vessel to discuss women's issues and hopefully evoke change. Roseanne began performing at various comedy clubs throughout Denver. But despite having a solid act and being an instant hit with the audience, several club owners banned her from their venues. According to Roseanne, they felt like her set was too vulgar, too radical, and too offensive towards men. In an effort to expose these club owners, Roseanne contacted the local media, informing them that she was being censored because she was a woman. Not wanting any negative publicity, club owners who had previously prohibited Roseanne from performing at their clubs now wanted her back in their venues. But despite putting Roseanne at the top of the bill, certain club owners still tried to control what she said and did. Roseanne recalls, "I started headlining comedy clubs about 8 months after I started, which is pretty incredible, especially for a woman. I was a giant curiosity, something people had to see. I was the filthiest act ever. People couldn't believe the stuff I would do, and I would do anything." Ed Nichols, the owner of the Comedy Works, was one of the many who read me the riot act. "Half the audience already hates you," Ed explained. "Yeah, which half?" I responded. "The men, that's who. And the women, if their husbands are uncomfortable, they're not gonna laugh. And another thing, I'm not booking you back in this club unless you drop that Kennedy joke," he said. Part of my act was about the difference between male comics and female comics. For instance, Lenny Bruce said Jackie Kennedy was climbing out of the limo in Dallas to save her own ass. That's Lenny, the archetypal male comic. See, that's the male perspective. I'm a woman, and I know that was never true. She wasn't climbing out to save her own ass. She sees her husband's brains sliding down the back of the car. She's going out there because she's trying to clean up the mess. I used to get standing ovations in some clubs for telling that joke. The thing was, once they started laughing, they loved it. Men loved jokes about how stupid they were. They loved it so much because it was the truth.
A lot of stuff bugs me about husbands. You know, like when they all the time want to talk to you. I hate that. Well, he says to me, "Hey, Roseanne, don't you think we should talk about our sexual problems? You know, like I'm going to turn up Wheel of Fortune for that." gift certificate, babe. He comes in there, hey, Roseanne, do we have any Cheetos left? Like he can't go over and lift up that sofa cushion himself.
Roseanne would spend the next few years working on her craft as she performed at various venues throughout Denver. In addition to winning Denver's Laugh Off competition in the early 80s, Roseanne also performed for other comics, such as Sinbad. But despite Roseanne having success with her current set, she realized that there was a method to the madness, and if she really wanted to make a change in society through comedy, she needed to be a bit more strategic with her act. According to Roseanne's sister, Geraldine, Roseanne came to the conclusion that she couldn't uplift her female audience by constantly putting her male audience down. Though she wanted to represent a sense of feminism in her content, it couldn't always be at the expense of men. It would take Roseanne some time to perfect her formula, but by 1984, Roseanne had created a set that would catapult her career. In her book, Geraldine writes, "We knew that humor could be extraordinarily subversive, a tool for change, a means for education, a method for undermining authority. Our basic audience was going to be blue-collar women. The women we saw as our primary audience were likely overweight, even obese. Certainly, they did not have the figures of models, nor did they go to health clubs. A workout consisted of chasing after their children and picking up after their husbands. Our target audience was often frustrated with their lifestyle. They hated the chores that kept them chained to the house and often rebelled by just saying, 'To hell with it.' The floors were not spotless. The dirty breakfast dishes might still be in the sink. And if their husbands wanted to live like the stars of shows such as Father Knows Best or Leave It to Beaver, they had better get rich enough to hire a maid. The women in our target audience wanted something more than a pat on the head and a kiss on the cheek for spending the day cleaning and the night bringing beer and potato chips to spouses sitting in front of the television." Roseanne tried to do two things with her audience. The first was to help the women recognize that menial household tasks were important and worthy of respect. The other idea Rosie tried to get across was that there was a better future possible. Women could do more. We also came to understand that our target audience came with men attached. Casual dates, steady boyfriends, lovers, and spouses. We could not attack men without adding jokes that either also attacked women or somehow praised the men as well. There was a rhythm to a good comedy act. And over a 2-year period of development, we created the concept of women as domestic goddesses. Rosie and I worked out the idea of using the term as the vehicle for rebellion. We thought women would relate to another woman announcing that she was not to be called a homemaker, but a domestic goddess.
Well, it's a thrill to be out of the house. I never get out of the house. I never go no place. I never have no fun ever, because I'm a housewife. You a housewife too? Yeah, I hate that word. I hate the word homemaker too. I want to be called domestic goddess. So I am a mom, I tell you that. That's great. I got 3 kids. I'll tell you how I had them. You'll love it. Well, I had one with the birth control pill, then I had one with the diaphragm, then I had another one with the IUD. I don't even know what happened to my IUD. Never came out. Says, God, Roseanne, I cannot even remember the last time we had sex. Well, I can, and that's why we ain't doing it. And then they're never happy either, you know. They're never happy. You try real hard, but they're never happy. So, Roseanne, I need more space, so I locked him outside.
Oh, yeah, I used to be much more radical or whatever in my comedy than I am now. But I found a middle ground where people would listen to me, because when it boils down after everything's done is every woman is like a housewife to me. I don't care if you're, what's her name, President of Pakistan there or whatever.
Mrs.
What's
Bhutto.
his name? Yeah.
You think Mrs. Bhutto comes home and has to wash the dishes?
Yeah.
She has to take care of the baby, probably.
Of course she does.
Yeah.
You know, well, let's talk about that. You know, that's what I want to talk about, that. I don't want to talk about that she's president. I don't care. She still does the dishes, and you know it, and I know it, and so does, what's her name? Well, Thatcher, she probably has slaves, but I mean, every woman does it, and everybody knows it. And people would go, well, why don't you talk about more universal things? And I go, but what am I going to talk about? When I went to Vietnam, what am I going to talk about? I clean everything, and everything's my fault.
This is what gets me, too, is that they always think that you're going to be the one that cleans everything, huh? Like, they think that's your destiny to clean. And I guess their destinies have a couch surgically implanted on their behind. I mean, you may marry the man of your dreams, ladies, but 14 years later, you're married to a couch that burps.
By the end of 1984, Roseanne had made a name for herself in Denver. But despite her successes, Roseanne wanted more and set her sights on Hollywood. After auditioning for Mitzi Shore, co-founder of the Comedy Store in Los Angeles, Roseanne would book her first gig in a women's comedy special titled Funny. While rehearsing for Funny, Roseanne would be approached by a man who would give her her biggest break yet. His name was Jim McCauley, talent coordinator for Johnny Carson's The Tonight Show. Roseanne writes, "One night, after I finished my act at the Comedy Store, this guy comes up to me and says, 'Hi, Roseanne, I really love you.' 'Oh, well, isn't that great? Move,' I said, shoving him out of the way. 'Roseanne,' the guy starts laughing, 'you don't know who I am, do you? I'm Jim McCauley from The Tonight Show. I want to put you on Friday. Come down and see me at NBC tomorrow.' I was just breathless. I took his card and thanked him, then walked out to the lobby where the cashiers and waitresses hung out. 'Go in there and get my sister,' I ordered one of them. Geraldine, who was there for my act, came running out. I couldn't even talk, so I just handed her the card, and then we both went nuts. For a week before my performance, I was going to the Tonight Show offices every day, going over my material with Jim, having the Tonight Show people okay it. They didn't want me to say uterus on the air, because no one had ever used that word on TV before. 'I don't know if I can clear this show,' Jim cautioned. 'There's nothing wrong with the word uterus,' I told him. In the end, uterus was cleared. Just before I went out to do my 6 minutes on The Tonight Show, I opened this letter I had written to myself long ago, with the intention of reading it should I ever get to do The Tonight Show. It said, "This is the beginning of your life, for she who is and is not yet. This is for my kids, because my kids are going to go to college." So I read this letter that had every secret thing about my hopes and dreams since I was 2 years old, everything I had somehow known, and it was like a heroin rush. And then Johnny introduced me.
Fat, I thought I'd point that out. Have you ever noticed that fat people don't think like skinny people? We have our own way of thinking. Like, did you ever ask a fat person for directions? Because that is when the difference in thinking really shows, you know. Because you go up to them on the street and ask them where something is, and they tell you like this: "Well, go down here to Arby's." And go right past Wendy's, McDonald's, Burger King. It's that chocolate brown building down there. It's a lot different. But it's good that I'm fat, though, because I'm a mom, and fat moms are better than skinny moms. Because what do you want when you're depressed? Some skinny mom? Well, why don't you jog around a while, and that'll release adrenaline in your blood, and you'll better cope with stress. Or some fat mom? Well, let's have pudding, Oreos, and marshmallows. you wake up from that sugar coma, it'll be a brand new week.